Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to this very, very special bulletin, very special bulletin in result of the COVID-19 updates and the 3-day lockdown in Brisbane. Well, in another half an hour, the lockdown in Brisbane will begin. So if you haven't had your mask, make sure you get your mask ready. Don't get caught. If you are traveling and other things, make sure that, if you're passing that point where it becomes 5 p.m., the new rules take in place. The 3-day lockdown will take place. Well, of course, everyone's been aware of that, but the Queensland COVID-19 stats stand at 10 active cases, 10 new cases in the last 24 hours. And that is the reason. And with the coming Easter and everything, I think the government, Queensland government wants to be prepared. So total cases, 1,456. And total tests so far have been 2,147,661. And the vaccines, so far we have vaccinated 59,126 people. So from 5 p.m. AEST, the Greater Brisbane goes into a 3-day lockdown. So what would this 3-day lockdown mean for everyone? Masks for Queensland, all of Queensland, including Greater Brisbane, will be mandatory. So there's now two ways about it. Masks must be worn. Okay, then moving on, you must carry a face mask with you all the times when you leave home. So if you're leaving home, you make sure you got your keys and wallet and everything, and most importantly that you have your mask with you, unless you have a lawful reason not to. And that would be a directive from the health department or something like that. If you have a lawful reason not to, then only you can. And now, you must wear your mask indoor spaces such as shopping centers, supermarkets, retail outlets, and indoor markets, meaning that these places will be open, and if you are there, you would be required to have your mask. Hospitals and aged care facilities, though, these are closed. But if you are going there on a special provision, you will need to have your mask. Hospitality venues such as restaurants and cafes, of course, not required for patrons while seated, but it will be required for customers facing staff. So if you're facing a staff, you need to put it on. But if you're sitting down, obviously, if you're sitting down to dinner, you won't be required to have that mask. Now, churches and places of worship. Now, this is very important, that churches and places of worship, you will be required to have your mask. Libraries, of course, masks are required. Indoor recreational facilities like gyms, except if you're doing strenuous exercise. Now, that could be, challenged, what it is. Indoor workplaces where safe to wear a mask and you can't physically distance. So, and public transport, taxis and rideshare, including waiting areas and queues for this transport. Airports and traveling on planes. So, if you're traveling, masks are, of course, needed throughout the full duration of the flight. It is strongly recommended you wear a mask when outdoors if you are unable to stay home more than 1.5 meters distance from another people, such as busy walkway or thoroughfares. So if you get to all those places, there is no way you can maintain that 1.5 meter distance. It is recommended that you have your masks on. And of course, masks do not need to be worn in some circumstances, including children under 12, or where people have certain medical conditions, and in workplaces where it is not safe to do so. You can remove your mask to consume food and drinks. Now, where we mentioned about the exercise, where strenuous exercise is exercise in or above the aerobic zone, including high-intensity interval training, cycling, or running. So there you go. That's explanation that on those cases you will not be required to wear a mask inside a gym. Now, as from 5 p.m. On 29, people have been in greater subject to the home confinement restrictions. The impacted local area are Brisbane of City, Brisbane of Ipswich, Logan City, Moreton Bay region and Redland City. So anyone who has been in these three areas since 20th March must follow the restrictions listed below. So what are these restrictions that are? So people in these areas, in and out, people in the impacted local government areas will be required to stay at home except for essential services. Visitors to aged care facilities, disabilities, accommodation services, hospitals and correctional facilities in these local areas are restricted. This restriction is for all Queensland, including Greater Brisbane. People can leave their home for a permitted purpose, accompanied with people from their household or alternately by one person who is not a member of the household. So if you have a person who is not a member of the household but who has been directed to go with you, so one person can accompany you. Individuals are able to leave Greater Brisbane area to return to their home outside of Greater Brisbane for essential reasons, which is below, and must continue to follow the lockdown rules. Anyone who was in Greater Brisbane on or since 20th March but has since left must follow the same lockdown rules as in Greater Brisbane. Those who transit into Greater Brisbane from surrounding areas of work, healthcare, study, or to support a vulnerable person may do so if it is not reasonably practical to make other arrangement such as work or study from home. So if it is not possible to do that, you are exempt. People can enter Greater Brisbane to transit through Brisbane Airport. So that's another reason. If they're transiting through, they can. Now, reasons to leave home during this Greater Brisbane lockdown period. Now, these are the ways you can leave. Shopping for essentials, meaning food and necessary supplies. Health and medical needs, including compassionate requirements. And exercise with no more than one other person, unless all from the same household. Well, if you're all living together, that makes a bit of a difference. Providing care or assistance to an immediate family member. Work or volunteering or studying if it is not reasonably practical to do so remotely. So if you are unable to work remotely or volunteer or study, then you are allowed to go to your workplace. Child custody arrangements and, of course, legal obligations and whatever those legal obligations may be. So if you are obligated and you have legal requirements, you will have to stay home. Well, and of course, visit for end of life. Now, of course, if you are going to see someone under those very difficult circumstances, you are exempt. You can attend funeral or wedding in line with the restrictions, and we will look at those restrictions to say what those restrictions are. In an emergency situation, or if you are in a situation where there is a threat to your safety and to escape harm, you may be allowed to leave. If you entered the impacted area responding to an emergency as an emergency health service or emergency service worker or national defense, state security or police officer. So if required to allow an essential service to occur, such as transport of freight in and out of Greater Brisbane, or if you are directed to leave by an emergency health officer, you have an exemption from the chief health officer. So if you have all of these, then you can. Now, gatherings. Visitors at a private residence are limited to 2 per day. A person who owns, controls or operates a premises other than a residence must not organize or allow a gathering to occur on the premises. Now, this is very important about schools. So schools will be closed from tomorrow. So tomorrow, from Tuesday, they will be closed until term 2, which is on Monday, 19th of April. Except for vulnerable children and children of essential workers, the school will be closed from 30th March till 19th of April. Now, what about weddings and funerals? Wedding ceremonies can take place with a maximum of 10 people, which includes the celebrant and the witnesses. And funerals, maximum of 20 people, excluding officials. Officials are the funeral directors and their workers. Because of restrictions on non-essential business, wedding, reception and other events, post-weddings and funerals should be postponed. Non-essential businesses, now what's going to happen with them? So a person who owns, controls or operates a non-essential business, again subject to interpretation, activity or undertaking an impacted area, including operating at a private residence, must not operate the business activity or undertaking without limited exceptions. So, clubs, pubs and restaurants are allowed. No dine-in customers, only takeaway. Boot camps and personal training to 2 people outdoors, including the trainer, with physical distancing observed. Social sports is permitted, such as golf and tennis, limited to 2 people outdoors with physical distancing observed. Community facilities to remain open for the purpose of hosting essential, voluntary or public service, such as food banks or homeless service. Community facilities may continue to operate if they provide formal out-of-school care. Physical distancing must be observed to the full extent where possible. Food markets and farmers markets will continue to operate. Real estate. Now, real estate auctions and open houses can be conducted, but by private appointments only. Restrictions outside of Greater Brisbane. Now, this is what's going to happen to rest of Queensland. Gatherings in people's homes are limited to 30 people at a time in total, including people you live with. Now, vulnerable populations, visitors to aged care facilities, disability, accommodation services, hospitals, and correctional services across the state are now restricted. So, non-essential businesses, activities, and undertakings. Restaurants, cafes, bars, and nightclubs can only be open for seated eating and drinking. No standing allowed. Now, what's going to happen over Easter? So, Easter, well, of course, Queensland government wants everyone to have a safe and happy Easter. And they like to remind all Queensland residents and visitors to stay up to date with the latest health direction that will be in place over the long weekend and school holidays. Make sure you stay home when you are sick and get tested if you have COVID-19 symptoms. Keep a distance of 1.5 meters from others. What it means is 2 big steps. And keep washing your hands regularly. If you are indulging this Easter, remember to drink water straight after eating any sweet treats. Helps wash away any residual sugar. Your teeth and dentist will thank you both. If you are traveling this Easter, remember, if you are flying, you must wear a mask at all times, at the airport and on the plane, meaning that flights will be operating. If the space you are in becomes overcrowded, move somewhere or choose to return at an off-peak time. So these are some of the essential key messages. Make hygiene your #1 priority when traveling. It is recommended, regardless of whether you are staying in a hotel or in a camping ground, always carry tissue and hand sanitizer. Now, another big question is Anzac Day. So Anzac Day commemorations, including marches, parades, dawn services, and other commemorative events can take place this year. So Yes, you've heard that right. They can take place this year, but there's a whole list which I will not go into right now, is why and how they can take place, including, you'll need to visit the website to find out, Queensland Government website, to find out about the full list of do's and don'ts and how Anzac Day parades and dawn service may take place. Now, the other question that everyone has is about the COVID-19 vaccine. So, AstraZeneca vaccine information for people with history of severe allergies. So, as reported on March 17th, patients were asked to give a history of severe allergy to consider delaying their vaccinations in response to 4 serious adverse reaction events. Safety is, that is, you must always give safety your first priority. Following further advice from the theoretic good administration, we are no longer asking people to delay their vaccination. So, Health Department has cleared that. As of 18th March, eligible people with a history of severe allergic reactions can be vaccinated and should be monitored for 30 minutes after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. So, Queensland Government rollout of the... now, what's happening with Queensland? Queensland's borders are open to New Zealand. So, as from 6 p.m. on Saturday, 20th March, Queensland borders have been open to New Zealand. New Zealand's status as a safe travel zone with Queensland has been reinstated, and anyone from New Zealand who travels to Australia on a quarantine-free flight can come into Queensland without needing to quarantine. Please note that other countries, including New Zealand, will have travel restrictions in place. Queenslanders are urged to visit Smart Traveller before making any travel arrangements. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we know, there's lots of conditions on these restrictions, and please observe all those before you make any travel arrangements. So, Greater Brisbane into lockdown from 5 p.m. And residents in Brisbane, Logan, Moreton Bay, Ipswich and Redlands can leave home for these reasons and these reasons only: to buy essentials like groceries or medications, work or study, and if either of those can't be done from home, exercising in your own local area, healthcare, or to provide for healthcare. Masks must be worn outside the home. So these are some of the key points of this lockdown. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very, very special announcement, keeping you up to date on Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times, providing you up-to-date information. And as I said before, that as and when required, we would come online to give that information to everyone. But for now, has been said in the bulletin that please exercise care, and as from another 10 minutes, these new rules come into place, and of course you don't want to be caught out, as last time there were people who were caught out. So please do have your masks handy. And message from our Lord Mayor and Premier is that do not panic into the shops, do not go into the panic buying mode, as plenty of supplies are available. The lockdown is for 3 days and 3 days only. If we do all the right things, we will have a good Easter coming up. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for me in this very special bulletin and update. Until tomorrow morning, it's goodbye from me. Observe those rules and be safe.